So I've always been interested in access and why our students haven't had access to the top universities or any university across the United States. So that's been my interest and passion for a long time. The other interest that intersects with what we're going to talk about today are students. As a first-year teacher in Oakland, California, my principal basically told me, he's like, you're too nice, you're never going to make it here. And it was very interesting to me because actually I come from a very family that is very strong and supportive, and also my dad was in the military, and just learning, like, there's a way to command a classroom, you know, even if I was nice and young and, you know, fresh out of college. But what really helped me my first year were the students. And the students were such revolutionaries. And when I also taught French as a foreign language, and when the students found out that I could also teach French, they went to the administration. The administration was like, no, you don't need French. They actually went back to their parents and got their parents to protest. So I taught ESL and French, so they could also have another language, because at that time we had Spanish and we had French. And then another opportunity came when the principal came to my room as a first-year teacher. They were like, Miss Knight, we know how this works. We will raise our right hand if we know the answer, and we will raise our left hand if we don't know the answer. So all the principal will see is that we're engaging and will respond to anything that you ask us. They came to me and shared that strategy. So from then on, I knew students had a power that we were not tapping into. And so even now, all these years later, I believe in student voice, I believe in student leadership, I believe in student advocacy. And so that's basically what I'm going to talk about when we do the research project, engaging in our own practice.
Well, again, my name is Imani Caraballo, and even though we didn't know each other then, I also started my career teaching in California. I taught in English, and I was an assistant principal in California in Berkeley for 10 years at a very, very diverse school where, in addition to my own experience going through the system, which resonated so much with what the students shared earlier that it really moved me, I was also working with other students that had similar stories. So I've always been interested in student stories and students' narratives, and it overlapped so well with my work in English language arts. And so when I left and decided to pursue my doctoral career, my research naturally took me to student stories and students' narratives. And so I did a long-term, a 3-year ethnographic study in an urban public school here in Manhattan. And what I learned about how students experienced the curriculum and how they negotiated the identities that they had to construct at home in order, to survive, to get along with their families, to continue to support their cultural communities, and then what they had to do in school to be successful was really very, very moving for me. And it gave me a different kind of impetus in my research and my practice, and it made me think about how can I work with students, not in conducting research about them, but with them. Because I felt like so much of what they had shared with me and so much of what they had taught me was only going to be communicated by my voice and through my perspective, and that's what led me to the idea of engaging students in research. So today, I also want to talk about how that has informed my practice and how I now use it in my work in preparing pre-service teachers.
So the first question I'm going to ask you, I actually am doing work with the Department of Ed, doing in-service work around culturally relevant education and college readiness and access. And so this is the first question I just want to throw out to you. When you think of Latino families, what comes to mind? Love?
Diversity.
Diversity?
Hard work.
Hard work? Love, diversity, hard work?
Focus on education.
Focus on education?
Perseverance.
Perseverance?
Trepidation.
Trepidation?
Bilingualism.
Bilingualism. So many of you have mentioned what we consider, of course, as strengths-based notions of families. Very positive, very affirming, comes from a good space. Unfortunately, what I hear a lot is that they don't care about education. They won't come to the school. and they don't speak English. So we can see how different that is from what we just heard here today. And so I just want to share that today I'm going to build on many of these strengths-based perspectives that we just talked about. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to really bring together students and families, notions of college readiness, and the Common Core. And the activity on student inquiry I'm taking today is actually a book that a Brooklyn high school teacher and I wrote on college ready, preparing Magdalene Latino youth for higher education. And what we're looking at, how many of you are familiar with culturally relevant education? If you could just raise your hand. Okay, great, good. So, we're looking at the 3 tenets, and most people focus only on the academics, and they think academics is enough. And what we've learned is academics alone is not enough. It is necessary, but not enough. And so we want to move beyond just the Common Core learning standards, and we really want to think about how many of those things that you just shared, how do we build on the cultural knowledge and experiences that our students and families have? So instead of seeing them as they don't speak English, we see them as bilingual. Instead of seeing the love and compassion that many of you just talked about, we tend to see they don't care. So how do we really bring forth this positive, affirming cultural knowledge and lived experiences that our students and families have into the schools? And then the next thing we want to think about is critical consciousness that many of us already bring about because of different experiences that we've had in life around access and equity. So today when we're thinking about student inquiry, I'm thinking about across all areas. So student inquiry is not just something at the high school level or even at the elementary level, but it's something that can go across all levels, PK through 20, as well as in community-based organizations. I work with some organizations that use student inquiry as well. And so what we're really trying to do is how do we foster and promote student voice and leadership? How do we think about students as having knowledge to co-construct with us as educators? How do we think about them researching a topic that is of interest to them? And how do we develop this academic identity while affirming their cultural identities? We're trying to do all of these in terms of supporting our youth. So when we say they're not making it, or we see the data and the data is showing they're not making it, how do we bring together all of these elements to really support our youth? And so what I did, I worked on a research project with about 25 youth, and we actually paid them $10 an interview because what we wanted our youth to see is that researching is an academic identity. And so the kind of things you encounter as a researcher are the kinds of things you can encounter in any of your classes around science or English in terms of like co-constructing questions. And so they had to do an interview with a family member because this particular school was saying the family members won't come. But I was sharing family members still have a lot of knowledge and they're hardworking and they may be working hard and they can come, but that doesn't mean they don't care about their child's education. And it doesn't mean they don't want to be involved. So how do we as educators plan lessons that involve our parents without them having to come to the school, but they're still involved? And so this way of doing student inquiry allows our students to go into their families and communities to really begin to ask questions that are of interest to them that also build on academic literacies. So they went, so we gave them a research team that I had, gave about 10 to 17 questions with our students that we were really interested in knowing. And then we asked them to create 5 questions that they really wanted to know about going to college, that no one was answering for them. So what we were saying about lack of information, how do students get information? So one of the things we wanted to think about was what kind of information did they want, first of all. And then when we looked at who they interviewed sisters, mothers, aunts, fathers, cousins, and a coach. So why do you think they would choose a coach as a family member?
Maybe they spend a lot of time with the coach.
Say that again?
Maybe they spend a lot of time.
They spend a lot of time with the coach. The coach seems as a family member, someone who really cares about them. So when we say family members, a lot of people always think it's only mother and father. But we're really trying to talk about extended members of our community that we see as family. And that's who they decided to interview. Okay. So these are only the questions, these are some of the questions that the students came up with themselves. We analyzed them and put them into 5 categories. And so the categories were high school to college connections. They wanted to know about family experiences in college. What role did race and ethnicity in their lives play? Questions about financial aid. And then we did a topic called future-oriented questions. And so actually what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to give you some of the questions. And actually, since we have about 10 people, Maybe if we can get into groups of 3 or 4, and each of you will have a question. And I want you to just hypothesize if the Latino student was asking this question of a family member, what do you think the response would be? So if we could get into groups of 3 or 4, that would be perfect.